Biden and your IRA. Hey everyone, Adam Bergman here, tax attorney and founder of IRA Financial. And on today's Adam Talks, what does the election victory of President Biden or re-election victory or former President Trump going back to the White House, what does that actually mean for your IRA? So wanted to do something because we all watched the debate a couple weeks ago, and we'll see what happens in the future if President Biden and the Democratic Party still want to put him forward, or they're going to go for another candidate, or maybe it's Vice President Kamala Harris, or maybe it's you and me. Who knows? But my focus has always been taxation, self-directed retirement accounts. So I did a podcast maybe 3-4 months ago about proposed budget for President Biden, and some of the IRA stuff was in there. But I wanted to kind of review some of the things and then compare it to what at least the Trump campaign has put forward. Now, just to be clear and for the record, this is going to be totally bipartisan. I'm not going to suggest either way where people vote. That's not the point of this podcast. This is not a political podcast. This is a podcast that will provide you the facts when it comes to using an IRA or 401k to invest. And we'll talk about all the tax details, implications, ramifications of certain decisions politically, but I'm not going to get into politics here. There's just no point. I think it's better to be bipartisan, no matter what you think about Republicans or Democrats. It's a cycle, right? The Democrat Party will win, they'll lose. Republicans will win, they'll lose. It's always going to be cyclical. That's what makes this country great. Even if there is a Republican president, if they don't control the House or Senate, they're going to have to compromise to get things done. So President Biden, former President Trump, his campaign has not come out and have provided any direct details on IRAs. But we know from his 4 years in office, he was definitely pro-retirement. There was no one in his cabinet, no one really close to the president that talked about changing IRAs or 401ks or limiting Roths or in any way. So that notion only begun when President Biden was elected. If you go back to 2021 and the Build Back Better bill, that kind of never got off the ground. There were some provisions in there really that were floated by Senator Warren, Senator Wyden of Oregon, Senator Warren of Massachusetts. And their big fixation on billionaires and large retirement accounts. So if you look at President Biden's 2025 budget proposal, there are a couple retirement account related provisions. Number one, he wants to get rid of the Backdoor Roth IRA. So for folks making more than 161,000 single, 240,000 married followed jointly, he wants to prevent those making 400,000 or 450 if you're married followed jointly from doing a backdoor Roth IRA. Again, it's just a kind of an appeasement to some of the progressives. It's not a deductible thing, right? They're not losing tax revenue. It's basically saying, hey, we're going to stop millionaires and billionaires from adding more money in. But the income threshold is not $1 million or a net worth of $1 billion. It's 400, 450K married followed jointly. So they're really stopping middle to upper class folks from adding 7-8 grand more in a Roth IRA. Like, is that going to make a difference? It's not even taxable. So again, this is not a major issue. I don't think this goes anywhere. It didn't go anywhere in the Build Back Better bill. And I think it's really just a bow to the progressive wing to show, look, we're going to do something about billionaires, but this thing's really targeting middle to upper class. And again, I don't think it ever passes. The last provision, or the other major one, was anyone with a Roth IRA, over $10 million in an IRA. Now, IRA or Roth, anything above 10 million, you have to take out the difference between 10 million and the value, half of it. So if you have 11 million, 500 grand, 50% of the difference, $1 million, you have to take as a distribution, whether it's taxable or not, depending if it's a Roth. If you're under 59.5, you won't have to pay 10% penalty either. This is interesting because, President Biden, again, he's only saying this will apply if you make more 450K or 400, but if you have a $10 million IRA, you're probably a pretty wealthy guy. So you're probably making 450, but not necessarily, right? Maybe you don't. Maybe you live off your Roth IRA. So again, this is a wide-in proposal, center-wide of Oregon, to say, hey, we're going to stop super rich people from getting even richer in their Roth IRA. But again, these people didn't do anything wrong. They just were savvy investors, and they just did it in a tax savvy account, which was put in the code by Senator Roth of Delaware. So back in 1997, encouraged savings. Now, some of the Democrats will say, hey, no one expected the Roths to get this big. It really wasn't the intent to get this big, but whatever. Who knows what the intent was? The bottom line is that they want to stop big IRAs. Okay, so that's the key for the Biden IRA proposals. Now, if you look at Trump again, his campaign hasn't put anything related to IRA. So to be determined what that means, but from past history, there hasn't been any type of legislation, even really presumed that would limit IRAs, Roth IRAs, or any context. So I don't think we'll see anything significant if he was elected. So that's on the IRA world. That's kind of the core of the podcast. I'll briefly touch on some other topics of taxation, business, individual, carried interest, real estate that I found interesting that you may as well. So I'll start with the president. And there's more information since obviously President Biden is in office and he put forth the 2025 budget. So from a corporate tax standpoint, he wants to raise it from 21 to 28%. He wants to increase the alternative minimum tax for corporations to 21 from 15. He also wants to, from an international tax standpoint, that was the big corporate stuff. He wants to, make it a little bit harder for U.S. companies to keep money overseas. Digital assets, he wants to apply wash sale rules, like you can't sell an asset within 30 days, sell it and then buy back within 30 days. That applies to securities. He wants it to apply to Bitcoin and digital assets. He also wants to apply mark-to-market rules for digital asset dealers and traders. For individuals, he wants to change long-term capital gains. If you have gross income of excess of $1 million, he wants to change that from 20 to 39.6%, which will be interesting because if you sell your dry cleaning business for $1 million or $2 million, doesn't mean you're a billionaire, but you're going to get taxed potentially at 39.6%, actually really close to 44.6%, because the increases the rate from 20% to 39.6%, and then there's the Obama tax, so it could be over 40% tax. He wants to have a minimum 25% mark-to-market tax on taxpayers with net assets above 100 million. This is the wealth tax. There was a recent Supreme Court case, Moore case, which I'll actually do a podcast on, and I've talked about it in previous podcasts, where the Supreme Court said that a tax that forced a U.S. taxpayer that had an investment in a foreign business to realize income, even though he didn't sell the investment. The Supreme Court was clear that this only applies to a specific case and not to a wealth tax, but maybe the genie's out of the bottle, or the shaving cream's out of the bottle. It's maybe hard to put back in. So we'll see how that works. He wants to treat all pass-through business income of taxpayers with income over 400 grand to be subject to a 3.8% additional tax. He wants to get rid of the carried interest and treat that as ordinary income, not capital gains. He wants to get rid of like-kind exchanges for $500,000 a year. They want to basically limit it to $500K, which won't help many people. You can't really buy anything relevant on a like-kind exchange in a commercial real estate setting for $1 million, married, filed jointly. He wants to change some depreciation deduction stuff. And that's some of the big stuff I wanted to go through. Now let's go to President Trump, or former President Trump. Again, there's less we have out here. Just his campaign hasn't produced a lot, but he did say he wants to lower the corporate tax rate 21 to 20%. On capital gains, dividends, he hasn't put anything. I don't think he wants to change anything. He wants to go back to the 2017 tax cuts and make it permanent for estate taxes. He wants to tax large private university endowments. Talked a lot about tariffs. He wants to have huge tariffs, which he feels will help with tax revenue, help also have more leverage with global powers like China. He wants to, for individual income tax, he wants to make the expired individual tax cuts from his 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act permanent. He wants to consider replacing personal income tax with increased tariffs, that I talked about. He wants to exempt tips from income taxes. And here's some stats. 2018 W2 data, 6.1 million taxpayers reported 38.3 billion in tip income. So, will that change? Lawyers say, hey, pay me $100 an hour and the rest in tips. We'll see. I'm not sure that gets off the ground. And that's the big stuff. So just to come back to IRAs, Biden has been clear. If you look back all the way from when he was elected, he's definitely tipped his hat a bit to the progressive wing of his party and appeased them with at least proposed legislation on limiting Roth IRAs, limiting conversions for folks over $400,000 or $450,000 of income, which are not, billionaires. And there's some other related IRA stuff that was part of the Build Back Better bill that never became law. If he gets back in power, that's, it's on the shelf. It's potentially, again, the toothpaste out of the tube. Is it hard to put back in? Now, President Trump, on the other hand, 4 years in office, never really addressed IRAs. He lowered taxes, especially the corporate tax rate. The highest rate was 35. He lowered it to 21, which I think really spurred economic growth. He didn't mess with capital gains tax rates. He produced the 2017 Tax Cuts Job Act. I definitely think, without getting political, that if you are worried about taxation and want to maintain lower taxes, then I think whether it's Trump or a Republican candidate, it's probably going to be a better bet than President Biden. In the IRA world, again, even if Biden wins, these provisions aren't going to go anywhere. They're not going to. There's not enough movement and interest in the House and Senate to get these things. Do they get tucked into a bigger bill? Maybe, but at least the Roth conversion one, it's not going to make any money. It'll actually lose tax revenue. And the big IRAs, 10 million IRAs, there's less than a few thousand people in the whole country that have that. So it's not going to do anything. It's not going to change anything. And it's just not important, right? If you're worried about winning Michigan or Wisconsin, these provisions aren't going to help you. And once you're in office, I think you're going to be worried about other stuff. So either way, I don't think, if you're worried about IRAs, and if you have over $10 million in your IRA, then I think you definitely have a little bit more to be worried about with Biden than Trump, although I wouldn't say a lot. Just don't think that piece of legislation ever gets put in. If you're worried about alternative assets being under attack, that's not going to happen in either case. So I think you're good if you vote Biden or Trump. You're going to be able to do self-directed IRAs. You're going to be able to buy real estate and hedge funds either way. So don't worry about it. Roth conversion, if you make more than $450 married filer jointly, Trump has never mentioned cutting that off or taking that off the table. Biden, at least it is in one of his proposals in his 2025 budget. But again, if you look at the Ways and Means Committee, you look at the Secure Act 1.0, which was passed in December 2019, and then the Secure Act 2.0, which was passed in 22, it's been bipartisan. The Ways and Means Committee, whether it's run by Republicans or Democrats, and it's been very pro-American, pro-Saber. So we're in good hands. Both Republicans and Democrats care about all of us from a retirement standpoint. They definitely disagree on other issues. We know that. We watched the debate. But when it comes to retirement accounts, other than some crazy progressives, which I don't think are mainstream in the Democratic Party, and the Republicans have some crazies too on their side, although they're not as focused on the retirement system. They're worried about some other stuff. Whereas the Democratic progressive wing is worried and has focused a bit on, wealth taxes, millionaires, billionaires. They're just like really focused on super rich people, even though that makes up such a tiny percentage of the population. It's just, their focus. So it's your call. I mean, I definitely strongly suggest keep watching these debates. I mean, after the one a few weeks ago, hopefully the next ones get better, whether Biden stays in or not, that's to be seen. But educate yourself, figure out what issues are important to you and focus on them. Ask questions. There's a lot of good content online. Definitely vote, exercise your right. But if your big issue, like mine, is IRAs, I think it's bipartisan. Maybe Trump's a little bit better on IRAs than Biden, or maybe. But again, I don't think it's an issue that's big enough that it's going to should swing your votes, right? If you like Biden, you want to vote for him. The fact that he's put some of these IRA provisions into the orbit, I wouldn't let it impact you, because these provisions aren't going to go anywhere, and they're not important enough. And if you want to vote for Trump, I'm not sure the IRA decision is going to matter. You should vote for him for other reasons, but the IRA thing is bipartisan, and limiting alternative assets and limiting big IRAs. Even if Biden's a little bit more for that than Trump, none of those provisions are going to see the light of day. I highly, highly, highly doubt so. So that's it for today's podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's always difficult getting into the political arena. I try to stay as independent as possible. I voted Republican, I voted Democrat. I look at the candidate, I look at the issues that concern me, whether it's state and local or federal. That's who I am. I'm not registered Republican or Democrat. I care about certain issues, and whoever I think the better candidate is for those issues, I will vote for that candidate. And I think a lot of Americans are like that. And hopefully we can get through this election cycle and focus on building a great economy and making America the best country in the world. So thanks again. Have a great day, and I'll see everyone again next week.